All right, everybody. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started. It is just two right after the hour of 2 p.m. Um, I hope everyone is having a great day today, and welcome to the From Seed to Certification Navigating the Journey of Organic Herb Farming webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join me today. I am your host. I'm D'Anthony Price, and I am the Southeastern organic consultant at Rodell Institute, and I am a part of the consulting team. And so we are a team that is nationwide, and we are here to work with farmers across the globe to, to support regenerative organic systems. I am based here in in Atlanta, and I work closely with farmers across the Southeast. And so, but I am really excited for today's live conversation where we will hear firsthand about the journey of organic urban farming and certification. Um, I have a dear friend and a farmer who will be here talking with us about her path and her purpose of farming. But before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. First thing, I want to make sure that everyone is able to hear me. So if you're not able to hear me, please feel free to raise your hand or to let us know in the chat. And secondly, we will have a section after the webinar where you will be able to ask some questions. And so please put your questions in the Q&A chat box. And once we get to that point, I will go through the questions. And if we don't get to every question, please feel free to email me your question, and we will respond back to you. But there is a Q&A chat box that everybody should be able to put their questions in. And secondly, I just want to take the time out to acknowledge the Southeastern Transitional to or Organic Partnership and Program. This is a program that is through the USDA with the whole goal of supporting and promoting current and transitioning organic farmers in the Southeast. And so if you are a current grower or if you are a current grower or a transitional organic grower, please feel free to scan that QR code on the screen, and that will take you to the website where you will be able to learn more about the program and all of the great benefits of this program. But with that being said, I want to go ahead and dive in to the main reason why we are here. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Lindsey Mann. She is a ecological designer with nearly 2 decades of experience. In the last few years, Lindsey decided to take that big leap and become a herb farmer. And so now she is a dedicated organic herb farmer out in Tiger, Georgia. And she is the owner and farmer of Stellar Roots Farm. I'm not going to talk too much more about Lindsey and her farming operations because I think she would do a lot more better job than I can. So first, Lindsey, I am just so happy that you are here with me today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, D. Anthony. I'm happy to be here too.
Yes, good. How is your springtime going so far?
It is full on. I'm still working the
Mhm.
landscape design to support the farm. So it's like two full-time jobs, which I think a lot of farmers are used to in the early years. And it's a lot, but I'm living my dream. I'm loving it.
I bet. Yeah, so every springtime is so busy and for me, but at the same time, it is probably my favorite season just because there is just so much I'm going on. But I am so glad that you are here with me. I want to first start off about by sharing how we met. So when I first started here at Rodale about a year ago, I remember you reached out and you were really excited about learning more about being organic, um, and then also starting the certification and process. And at the time, I was also very green, new, and so I was like, you know what? I hope she knows that we are going to learn together. But now we are here talking about that whole process, and so I am so excited to just really dive into that whole full circle moment. Um, but now, to kick things off, I would like for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your farming. I know that you want to share us some photos, and so please feel free to go ahead and um, share your screen.
Thank you, D'Anthony. D'Anthony and Rodale have been such a huge help in this organic certification process. I'm going to turn off my video so that I can share my screen. Nope, I don't know if that was an entire screen. How about this?
Oh, I need to stop sharing my screen.
Hold on, I gotta.
Yes, I'm so excited that you were able to join us on today.
Thank you. I know I need to just figure out how to get to full screen mode so that I can show the slideshow. There we go. Can you see it?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So this is Stellar Ridge Herb Farm. This has been a 25-year dream. I finally have the resources to some extent and just the gall to get started a couple years ago. Um,
Yeah.
oops, it's not letting me scroll through. I guess I could go like this. Let me try it one more time. The arrows, oh, there, okay. So this is me and all the photos are of my work and the farm or other landscape work that I've done. Like I said, I've been an ecological designer for a long time, like D'Anthony said, and recently started this herb farm. Way back, I remember my grandfather's garden as a kid growing up. My dad was always in the yard working on weekends. So I got real exposed to farming and working in landscape at an early age. And then after college, I pursued a graduate degree in landscape architecture and conservation ecology to practice a more sustainable landscape architecture. That's what we called it at the time. I started sustenance design in 2006, helping folks create ecological, edible landscapes in the city. That was back in 2006. I started that. I do all drawings by hand still because AutoCAD and a lot of the computer aided drawings just, they're not organic enough for the landscape. They don't respond to the landscape. I did mostly residential projects, but worked with a lot of schools and community groups through the years, established gardens. Um, it's just some examples I'm
Hey,
scrolling through.
Lindsay, just to let you know, we still see the first photo.
Are you
Um,
serious?
yeah.
I've been scrolling through a bunch of photos. Well, let me go back and just, can you see the second one? Do you see the second one now?
I do not.
Oh, this is a bummer because I have some really nice photos. Um, that's so strange. Why would it be stuck on the first?
How about you stop sharing your screen and then share it
Okay.
again for us again?
Okay. I'm kind of blowing through this pretty fast and okay, let's try this one. What do you see now?
It's taking a second. It's just a black screen.
It says my screen sharing is paused, so let me try that again. Technical issues. Let me stop it and start it again. Um, I don't know. I'm hitting share and then it says it's paused. So
It's okay. That's fine. Well, we can just keep on talking. And so that means that you can verbally describe your farm to us and things of that nature. And so you were talking about how you first got to your farm.
Yeah. What do you see now? Because I think it might be
I
working.
see your face and
Some
yeah,
photos.
yeah,
Okay. Well, this is when I was talking about just like I've started the design business. Do you see this? The next photo.
yes.
Okay. We'll just leave it like this with the photos on the side and
Sounds good. Thank you.
okay, great. Yeah. So this is just talking about hand drawing and starting substance design in 2006. And let me know, DeAnthony, if these pause and you can't see the slides anymore. But I'll just kind of go through quickly what I went through. Residential product projects, working with schools and community groups. This is a retreat center I designed back in 2014, I think, up in the Georgia mountains. It actually allowed me to move to Tiger and move onto the farm full time so I could really start connecting with the land a little more. This is the most kind of well-known project I did. I was the lead designer of the food forest at Brown's Mill in Atlanta. And then I started a farm in Decatur. It was really more, it was like it was a small mini farm in a city floodplain behind where I lived. And I led volunteers in biodynamic gardening. And as I was growing food and medicine, which I think are kind of interchangeable terms when you're talking about herbal medicine, that's another tangent. But I became engaged in post-harvest practices like canning and drying herbs, blending teas, and I got really into it. And I wanted to start a larger farm. And so from there, I sold my house in Decatur. I bought the farm in 2011. It's 8 acres of southeastern sloped pasture. It was farmed conventionally for hay before I purchased the land. It was perfect for growing sun crops, though, because of the aspect, and there's a stream on the property surrounded by forests. It's really very pristine. I was coming from the city, so being in this rural area was very pristine. I built myself a small cabin, but I didn't have the funds to start a farm at that time. So I did some small improvements to the landscape. This was the first rain garden that I put in that captures and infiltrates about 2,000 gallons of water at a time. And then I started a 1,500 square foot garden that became the basis of the first farm plot and planted like 10 nettle plants. This was about 13 or 14 years ago. And now it's the nettles patch. This you can see on the left here that we currently harvest about 150 pounds from. Kind of cool with herbs is that they're perennial. A lot of them are perennial, not all of them that we grow are. And they like to grow in plant communities. So you can just kind of plant them around, see what takes, do some experimenting, and the ones that love it over time will expand for you. They're appropriate for the ecosystem that you're growing in. And so now we're growing on 3/4 of an acre. We have another 4 acres that are cover crops and ready to be sequentially utilized for growing annual and perennial herbs.
Nice.
This is, yeah, one of my farmer helpers in the Tulsi fields last year. Processing, or actually, it's really called handling. You have to be careful in the farming world when you use processing because the FDA gets involved. So we call it handling, is a lot of work. We harvest the herbs by hand. We do use we use like a hedge trimmer for some tool for some herbs. And then we bring them into the drying room and dry them. And we monitor temperature and humidity. And there's me looking all mad that someone's taking my photo. And then of course I need to use that photo. That's how it is. And then we take the herbs into the prep room and we garble the leaves from the stems. It basically just means removing the parts that we want to utilize typically from the stems through screens, which is a lot of work. And that is one of the reasons that we charge more for dried herbs than fresh herbs because of the amount of handling involved. This is some handling of wild cherry bark where we're shaving the inner cambium layer to get the desired aroma. The whole entire room fills with like this almond cherry cola scent. It's amazing. Wild cherry is one of those native herbs that grows around here. They're trees and they grow wild on the property. We harvest the ones on the fence line to keep the fence lines clear. And then and then handle them like this for drying. And they're used in herbalism for cough syrup. So herbalists buy them from us. And then they also make this gorgeous Amaro spirit. And I just want to give a shout out to our best customer is Merle's Row Distillery in Decatur. They buy a lot of our herbs to make these gorgeous local small batch spirits they distill, and they support a lot of local farms in the region. So love these guys. Yeah, so that is my intro, D'Anthony.
Nice. Thanks, Lindsay. So one thing that I find interesting that before you became a farmer, you owned a edible landscaping business. And so I live in Atlanta, and so I know a lot about the Browns food forest. Um,
Yeah.
but so can you talk more about what made you decide to start a farm while also having that full business and how that connects with your background?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely an advantage to, I had a lot of familiarity with the plants that I now grow before officially
Yeah.
starting the farm. So that's been a huge advantage. And also working with soils and just kind of understanding the ecology of my region. That was a really important start. And I was and I am still so compelled by the complexity and diversity of ecosystems. This
Yeah.
really might be the main drive for me. And so when I had time before I started farming, I used to walk the land and just be in love with nature. The biodiversity I saw, the beauty, these are all photographs from the farm through the years. And I noticed that so many medicinal plants were already growing on the property. So both native and non-native species. This is non-native, I think Japanese honeysuckle, but it's used in medicinal, in herbalism. There's also some passion flower it's passion fruit, passion flower. We use all aerial parts for medicine and fruit on the bottom right there. And that volunteered in the fields. And then this is actually on a fence that I propagated some years ago. And then elderberry was on the property. That's in the top right. Um, and so I just love the idea that some of the best medicine is readily available for us. These are also photos like this is American persimmon and goldenrod that we use, Joe pieweed, and then what's that one, jewelweed. So these are just some of the medicinal herbs that were growing there already. And there's an adage in herbalism that says the medicine you most need is just outside of your doorstep.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so I just love that.
I agreed 1,000%. So while you were talking more about your background, you mentioned that you had a degree in agroecology. That is a word that a lot of people use around. So can you talk about more of what that means to you and how you use agroecology and practices on your farm?
Yeah, absolutely. It really, to me, is about supporting the ecology of a place, letting nature's wisdom guide. And the goal is regenerating the landscape through techniques I've learned from organic agriculture, biodynamics, and also permaculture. Infiltration of water is key. This is something that's not talked about a lot in regenerative conversations typically, but to me, it's really central, especially we're in such a rainy region. So we want to be able to utilize that water. So planting on berms and swales, this was an area that was kind of a steep hill and we really couldn't do a whole lot with it. So I turned it into these berms and swales. In 2022, you can see we took a bobcat, we just scraped all the soil around. It's very disturbing to the soil. And it's a little hard to see, but we put these berms and swales and where the swales are on contour, so they catch water and then infiltrate water. We put the plants that are a mix of like Dunstan hybrid chestnut. We've got Asian pear and persimmon, some native plum called Chickasaw plum. We plant on the berms or just over the berms, and then the system acts as kind of a passive irrigation. There it is in the springtime, just after it's like 6 months later, probably in February. And then here it is in May, where the cover crops are really showing off this crimson clover. It's a crimson clover rye. That's a cereal rye. And vetch and oats, milky oats mix. And then the milky oats we use, of course, for medicine. And so here's the actual swales you can see in the wintertime holding water on the right. And then I've added several other water systems as rain gardens on the property for the same purpose for infiltration. Including the beavers have moved in and they are creating their own ponds and they bring their own set of concerns for me, but also some ecosystem services like water infiltration. And I just want to mention that we had that hurricane blow through here last fall and we got an unprecedented amount of rain. Fortunately, we were spared, unlike a lot of our neighbors in southern Appalachia, but we did get 11 inches of water. So that to me was a real test to the systems and everything held up beautifully. So I felt really solid about these systems once all that, once we experienced all that. Um,
How did you having strong soil health and properties support your farm during those times of bad storms?
yeah, thank you. I want to also talk about that. I want to talk about soil, which really I could spend an hour talking about because it's so important. And also biodiversity. And these are really just more photographs of recently with the biodiversity. Just that I allow a lot, it looks like kind of overgrowth. We definitely mow paths, but I allow a lot of the plants that people consider weeds to grow and to spread because they provide a lot of ecosystem services, biomass production. We host tons and tons of pollinators. We do like selectively have to weed out. We use kind of mechanical and also hand weeding for some of the briars. Like we don't want blackberry or rose because it just makes it real hard to get in even in the wintertime because everything dies back. So everything looks real overgrown, but it does die back. And you've got that time over the winter where you can kind of reclaim the land and start editing for the following season. But you can see here the orchard where we've got, these are, the trees are only a few years old. We've got some apples on them, but there's lots of these aster and goldenrod. There's Queen Anne's lace that's growing that I realize is a bit invasive exotic, but it's just so pretty and the bees tend to love it. So I really do let things just be more of an ecological aesthetic. And soil, you asked about, D'Anthony. Um, we do a lot of work with soil. It's super critical. This is us adding some compost, which you've got to be like real careful with that word in the certified organic world because compost has to be monitored very carefully if you're gonna use that word. So this was technically raw manure because it came from a neighbor's farm where he had cows, so we had to follow some observances with raw manure. I do have a couple of pigs now that we are utilizing for tillage and fertilization. They're better than heavy equipment, in my opinion, because the heavy equipment, just is severely compacts the soil. So we're working with these pigs now who are kind of have little tractor front end loader turners on their on their snouts, and they're able to till the soil for me.
Yes. Y- y- I'd love to hear that you did add livestock into your system because especially when you talking about being regenerative organic, that livestock component it is very important because not only does it support soil health, but it also promotes more biome diversity. Now, with your land, when you purchased it, what was the past and history, and can you talk about some of that experience with translating transitioning your land into organic practices?
Yeah, let's look and see. When I bought the land, it had been farmed conventionally for many, many years, which means
Okay.
spraying herbicides. So the soil is like dead, a hard pan. It is really hard to remediate that kind of soil. I tell people that I would much rather remediate depleted city soil than soils that have been farmed conventionally any day of the week, any day, any decade, because it's really taken a decade to start to recover. Um, partially because of the spraying just really kills the life in the soil. And with regenerative farming, we want to improve. We want to increase as much life above and also below the soil as possible. So with all the years of hay harvesting also, that's 2 times a year they're harvesting hay. There's 3 or 4 passes with these huge machines that are compacting the soil. And then the hay is very extractive. So all the techniques that I'm talking about really have taken a long time for us to be able to start to regenerate things. The biodynamic preparations have been really key because they're some of the best ways to restore fertility. They're said to bring the innate intelligence back to the land, and I agree with that. I think that's an interesting way to look at it. It's really an agreement with the land. You're engaging with the elemental consciousness, so it's not something to do absent-mindedly. It's really a deeper relationship with the land that you're cultivating, but the results can be really beautiful. Yeah.
Nice. So during my experience with working with farmers
Mm.
in the Southeast is pest and disease and pressure is can be a really big challenge when you talk about farming organically. And so you live in North Georgia in the mountains. I have never farmed in North Georgia, but I have farmed in North Alabama. And I can tell you, we did deal with a lot of pests when it comes to farming organically. And so, can you tell us a little bit about how you manage your pest on your farm while using a IPM strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. Herbs do tend to have less pest and disease pressure. Partially
Really?
because I think they have wild genetics, and so they're just a little less finicky than a lot of the more hybridized and carefully cultivated food crops that we grow. Um, Not that they're free of pests and disease. We did have some spider mites on the nettles last year. I'm going to use this as an example because I happen to have a photo of it. This is from a couple weeks ago. We over harvested the nettle. We cut them too close to the ground. And this on the right is what they looked like before harvest. They were like the most vibrant, gorgeous, healthy plants. And then we came in, I think they should have been left to about 12 to 18 inches high. We cut them back to probably 6 inches. And this is what we saw. And this tells me, there's some things going on with the soil. I also think there might be spider mites here because it looks like the chlorophyll is being sucked out of the leaf. And so I use a neem oil spray. I use any spray very judiciously. And really, the only thing that I use to try to target insects is neem oil. And it's supposed to really preserve. And from my limited exposure, it does preserve the beneficial insect populations. It seems to, from what I've observed. And that's also what some of the literature says. Um, but I really like the whole idea is that we want to provide the right conditions for plants for them to thrive. So
Right.
nettles prefer a little shade in our area. These are in a lot of sun. The ones in shade tend to perform a little bit better. The ones in full sun were more affected. So preventative pest management is really key. Like helping the plant to be healthy from the start as opposed to trying to, go back after the fact after you have an unhealthy plant and treat whatever disease or pest there are. So I'm really just trying to provide as much health and vitality to the plants as possible up front.
Yeah, so with growing herbs,
Mm.
they also attract a lot of good bugs, which will overall help with your IPM management strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. So the herbs are often planted for companions because they attract beneficial insects. And so we've got like fields of them. And the amount of bees, the types of bees,
Oh,
like
I bet.
native bees, honeybees, bumblebees, wasps, and the thousands of them. So I really believe that that is also contributing, because that's biodiversity, and they're helping to contribute to the healthy ecosystem. So I also want to talk about weeds a little bit. This picture is so good because I love the biodiversity. There's a lot of asters in this photo that are attracting insects. Even the grass stalks are great habitat for a lot of the beneficial insects. But you can see that this can be very overgrown very fast. I think this is probably July of last year, and this is clearly a problem when it starts to happen in the rows that we're cultivating. So weed pressure is just intense in the southeast, and it's kind of understood that you need to use plastic mulch to
Right.
have a working farm in our region. And we use plastic to tarp before we go in and plant. I don't currently use plastic for mulch because I don't want it to break down. You have to cut holes in it and you're growing your crops in it, and I really don't want it to break down, and then I'm putting plastic into my soil. So we're trying, and we're using wood chips, which is kind of unusual. It's hard to do that with vegetable farming. It's easier with perennial plants because you've got that kind of nitrogen suck when the wood chips start to break down. But I'll put a little bit more, I'll feed the soil a little bit more. We use Harmony. We also use Neptune Harvest fish and seaweed concentrate for the plants. So we feed them a little more to counteract what the wood chips might be um, taking away in terms of nutrients, but they're very good with weed suppression, and they're also adding carbon in the soil. So we've got a local tree company that just does deliveries of wood chips all the time.
Nice. Now, would you also say that you planting cover crops has
Oh,
helped with your pests and with your weed management?
it really does. If you want to use cover crops for weed suppression, though, the key is to stay on top of it, because as soon as you skip a season, oh, like we did, we actually grew milky oats for a cover crop, which we can also harvest for medicine last June. And then we crushed them and laid them down, and I didn't tarp it right after, and I also didn't overseed with a cover crop. So I just walked away from that field, and I thought, well, I'm just going to address that in the fall. There's tons of stuff going on. It's like hard to be on top of everything. And so, but I ended up regretting that, because this spring, this is like we've had this massive regrowth of all fescue grass because I didn't go in and cover crop right away or tarp the field. And so cover crop's incredible. It does a lot for the soil, but you really have to stay on top of it season to season. So that's like planting at least 3 seasons of cover crops where we are.
Oh, I bet. And I am a very big champion of cover crops, so I could talk to you all days about it. But instead of boring everyone else, I want to kind of shift and now start. I'm talking about getting USDA organically I'm certified. So
Yeah.
as I mentioned them earlier, the Southeast transition to organic partnership program aims to educate farmers on certification and the challenges that comes with it. And so my first question to you is, are you currently certified? And can you also walk us through your experience of d- d- deciding to get them certified
Mhm.
and how that really best fits your farming operation?
Yeah. Okay. I don't know what happened with this slide, but my organic certification is in process. So we are not yet certified organic. My paperwork, it is a tremendous amount of paperwork to be certified. The paperwork and methodology have been approved, and I'm awaiting site inspection, and that's happening in exactly 1 month.
Yes.
So, and they just want to make sure that the practices that we've reported line up with what's actually happening. And so I don't anticipate an issue. I'm really looking forward to it. Um, and I was inspired to be certified because I'm growing herbs, which are just often considered medicine. And so having a certified organic product is considered desirable. I actually contacted a lot of folks in the herbal community prior to starting the farm, and just I did a questionnaire. What kind of herbs do you use a lot? Is organic certification important? And many of them said yes. So that really informed my decision to move ahead with certification. These slides
Nice.
are kind of funny. Yeah.
So once you decided to get get them certified, what are some of the best resources that you have used to start that process and to keep them supporting you throughout this process?
Yeah. The first thing is keeping good notes on all activities. So these two spreadsheets have been really crucial for us. I just set up a Google Docs, and anybody and everybody that's working with me, they have to just at the end of the day we have to fill out these sheets that tell us what we did, what we used, where we did the whatever we were doing, and how much we harvested. That's really key. It's so easy to like just bring a bunch of harvest and into the barn and put it in the drying room and then not record this stuff. So it's extra steps definitely to stop and weigh the products, but it's really critical for the certification. So the documentation, because it would be impossible to go back and try to fill out the organic certification documentation without having a field log and out without recording a lot of this stuff. You also have to have a materials and inputs list. So everything that you purchase to put as an input into your field, anything that's used remotely near the field has to be recorded. And then your seeds and your sources for plants. We're not growing starts. We source our starts from somewhere else. So that all has to be recorded. So it's just like recording everything. And it's a little bit, irritating to have to do that, but it's honestly been really helpful too, because I will forget a lot of times, gosh, I really think we need to broad fork the cabin garden or F1. I can't remember if we did that, and I can go back into the notes and see that, oh yeah, that was actually done last fall. And so maybe we should focus on a different area. So it can be really useful for your operation to have these notes too.
Yeah, so when I talk to farmers and talk to them about getting certified, a lot of them always bring up the act of record keeping and how that can be a big challenge for them
Hmm.
because of time, in which I get 1,000%. But one statement that I like to say is regardless if you are having to record keep for your farm to get them certified or to just run a business in general, having good record keeping and hygiene is always good to run a business. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on that statement and how record keeping has actually benefited your business in general.
Yeah, it does, because it's also helpful for me to know. So if we put 80 fresh pounds of Tulsi in the drying room, I need to know how much that dries down to. And what I've discovered is that Tulsi dries down to about 15%. It like 10 to 15% of its fresh weight. So that's really helpful to know, because now I can understand how much time it's taken us to get to this end product. And I wouldn't have known that if we hadn't stopped and weighed the fresh plant, and then after the handling and the garbling, weighed them again and figured out that translation from fresh to dried. So it's really helpful. And there's two other things I want to mention about the certification process too, is that picking a certifier before beginning is so key.
Mm.
There is this like 50-page document that you have to fill out, and I don't recommend trying to do it in one sitting. This is definitely like take a month and schedule some time to do. But it's USDA organic has a generic one, and honestly, theirs is incredibly confusing and frustrating. So I did theirs first, and then I picked my certifier, and then I realized that QCS, my certifier, wanted me to use their documentation. So I went and had to do the whole thing again. But I realized the second time that QCS was actually way more organized and way better. They're the certifier I'm using because they're local. I explored California certified organic growers because they've got a good relationship with biodynamics, but ultimately I wanted to just use somebody local. And so before you begin to fill out the paperwork, find your certifier and use their templates. That's really key.
I am glad that you touched on that because I have been through situations where farmers would come up with all of the templates, and then it's like, well, now we have to transition all of that information to the actual documentation, but also just the main importance of doing your own homework and your own research on which certifier is best for you and your farming operation. Each
Hmm.
each certifier has their own values, and their own ways of going about things, and so it's just really important to make sure that you pick the best certifier that best fits you and your farming goals.
Definitely.
Um, Now, before we open up for questions, I want to wrap things up by talking about markets. So
Yeah.
one of the main things, one of the major benefits of getting them certified is now you have the access of getting into new markets, which is your organic markets. So can you talk about more about your current markets, and then what are some new markets that you are looking at once you actually get certified?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a little unusual with markets because I don't do any of the weekend farmers markets, which is really cool. I don't like doing that. We have a farm store and we're open for events. So we value add products, which is really key, especially I think with herb farming because you've got a lot of fresh product and we can't always fit all of it into the drying room, but it needs to come out of the field. So tincturing using apple cider vinegar. We use certified organic ethanol to basically just make herbal extractions that you can see in the photos. Like some of those bottles are tinctures of like tulsi and milky oats that we've made. We also do tea blends um, just to be able to value add those products. And I network with local herbalists and this region, we've got a really rich tradition of Appalachian and actually, from the time of the Cherokee Indians, herbalism in this region. And then I think with the USDA certified, I'll be able to branch out even nationally, potentially with some of the products because that there's just that kind of trusted. It's always a good idea to know your farmer, but then if you have that certification, I think there's a level of trust there. If someone can't get out to the farm, that they know that you've at least got these practices in line. And honestly, like I'm in this small town and it's this rural town, but I found that Atlanta is a better market
Right.
because there's just this awareness of the importance of sourcing from local farms. And that's just kind of lacking in rural areas where the farms are located, which is like this huge irony I've discovered. I love this town and I want to serve this town with the high quality medicine I'm growing first. But the Atlanta markets have really been the greatest source of support. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Which
Oh, yeah.
so you know that I mentioned that I live in Atlanta, and there are so many farmers in this area that rely on actually going to farmer markets to
Yeah.
sell their product. And so, what made you not want to do that?
Mm, I just don't like the idea of having my weekends completely captivated by that. It's just not,
Yeah.
it's not where I wanted to be. But I wanted to mention that we also host classes on the farm, and that's what's going on in this photo. They're indoors and they're outdoors. And so this teaches people about using the herbs that we grow in their daily life. And so they're able to kind of grow with the farm and source products from us. And we sell some of our value added products that way because people can, buy in the shop afterwards. But it's a little bit of like, to the diversified income, from classes, although classes really don't make much money. It's really mostly like a community outreach thing and a community education thing, but that is part of the marketing piece. So that's
Nice. And
yeah.
so one more question I have about markets is,
Yeah.
so in the previous question, you talked about like a little bit about the storytelling when it comes to the power of the label and how when consumers see that label,
Mhm.
they know what type of practices that you are doing. And so, can you talk a little bit more about the power of that label and how it really connects to telling the story of all of the farming practices that you do on your farm?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that again, it's a way if people don't know me or don't have access to the farmer and can't visit the land to see what we're doing in person, that label speaks to a type of ethics and integrity that we have where we don't use pesticides, we don't use herbicides. Um, and and maybe the regenerative label takes it a step further. I'm thinking of to pursue the regenerative organic also. And regenerative is a good term. We used to call it sustainable, but we're not just sustaining. We are improving biodiversity. We're improving the soil. So it really is a regenerative practice. And so, yeah, I think the labels speak to because it is a very rigorous process and there is annual on-site inspection. And so it speaks to the integrity that we have, I believe.
That's good. Thank you so much. And and I have these types of conversations with farmers a lot about the power of the label. And what I will end on that is it just really depends on the whole goal of your farming operation. If you want the ability to really enter more markets that specialize in organic, then get the label and then also use the label with the power. But if that is not your goal of your farming operations, at the end of the day, what really matters is these growing and practices and how
Mhm.
um, these growing practices really affect our earth. And so I have truly enjoyed learning. Not only are you really seeking the power of that label, but really focusing on your land and the power of your land and the power of the these farming these farming practices that you are doing on your land. So, but I think I have talked a lot, so I am going to read some questions from the chat, well, from the Q&A box. So if you have not, please feel free to enter some questions. And so the first question that we see is from Carol, and she says, "What is berms and swalls?"
Yeah. I could see if I can find that picture again, but it's basically cutting swales on contour so
So
that the swale is level, so that the water level would be level, so that it catches water in the swales. And then the part that you dig out to make the trench for the what we call a swale, we berm on top so it holds the water in. So on a hillside, you can create berms and swales like this that capture water and encourage water to infiltrate.
nice. Okay. And so what would be the main purpose of having swalls?
Water infiltration. And so we use wells, a lot in your rural areas. I have a
Right.
well that we use. We supplement some irrigation. But when we infiltrate water, we're recharging those ancient aquifers. So instead of just directing the water down to the stream, and a city is a great example because it's just like all this impervious surface and all the water's running into the stream. And then it's like gouging out the stream channels and then the water's just getting carried away into the ocean. But we want to, as much as we can, stop, spread, and store and infiltrate water is really the best regenerative practice with water. Passive irrigation.
Agreed. At that 1,000% water conservation is a big key and pillar when you talk about environmentally friendly and practices. And so another question that we have for you is, do you sell your products online?
We do, yeah. And I apologize because we have kind of a high order minimum right now. We have a $200 minimum for online orders, primarily because I don't have the capacity to be shipping like all day right now. So um and I do want to prioritize, like I said, medicine for the community first. So we've got this bin that we offer free farm pickup. And then yes, we definitely would love to sell online, but there is that minimum, and I'm sorry that I cannot accommodate for lower orders at this time. Thank you for asking that.
I see. I see. Another question is, what would you believe to be some good staple herbs that a vegetable grower could work in their system that are safer options?
That's an amazing question. It really depends on your climate. I will speak to the southeast because that's the climate I know. It tends to work pretty well in the northwest too. Tulsi basil is a fantastic one to start with. Stinging nettle um, has so many just nutritious benefits. I could go on and on about stinging nettle. Yarrow is great in this region. Pleurisy root is one. It's actually butterfly milkweed, which is so good for the monarch butterflies. And it's like one that was traditionally used and not used as much in modern herbalism, but we're starting to use it more because it's really good for respiratory infections. Um, there's like so many more. Lemon balm is another one. Valerian. Yeah. Enough.
Are you more towards annual herbs or are you more towards perennial herbs?
Um, I like both. I love the perennial herbs because they can grow in plant communities, and that
Yeah.
gets really interesting with ecosystem dynamics. So we do both on this farm. And actually, the fields that we open up first, like the most recent, the first crops that we grow are annual, and then as the soil improves and as things tend to like the ecosystem matures over time, we can start to turn those areas into perennial.
Nice. Okay, good. Have you ever thought about expanding into other crops?
I have about 100 herbs. We're growing about 25 or between 25 and 30 herbs right now. And I think if this is ever done, I don't know if, done is ever a thing with landscapes, but at its mature phase, I think we'll be growing about 120 different ones with probably focused on like five that are the most commercially available. Yeah.
Do you have any plans on tapping into vegetables or fruits, or do you just want to mainly focus on herbs?
We have some fruit in the orchard, and I don't want to grow vegetables. I mean, I think it's really hard to grow vegetables, especially in the southeast. We've got like all these fungal disease issues, and just like I said, they're very finicky. And thank you if you're a vegetable farmer. It is such an important service, and I like ecosystems and I like plant communities, so I'm an herb person as far as growing.
Another question we have is, what books would you recommend?
That's a great question. So one of the best books that's been really helpful for me is by Zach Wood's Herb Farm. They're in Vermont, so there's been a lot of translation, but it's called The Medicinal Organic Herb Grower, if you wouldn't believe it. Patricia Howell is our herbal grandmother in this region. She just put out her updated copy of like medicinal plants in the Southern Appalachians. It's not about growing, there's a lot of wild harvesting, but it's about the native medicinal herbs that we have in this region. It's also a great book.
Have you used any Sayer books? I love all of the Sayer books. I think my favorite Sayer book is probably the Growing Cover Crops for Profitability. But Sayer has so many great books. All of their books online are free. And then if you contact your outreach coordinator in your region, I bet they could get you some books.
I'm so glad you mentioned Sarah D. Anthony, and I should just take a minute to mention the NRCS because a lot of these practices that I'm doing already on the farm, we've been able to receive funding through the Natural Resources Conservation Service. They have a program Equip that just rewards you for conservation practices that you might already be doing.
Nice. Somebody asked, would you be able to put the books that you recommend in the chat, the name of the books?
Yeah.
And then another question, um, I want to make sure that I understand this correctly, but they are asking about managing organic fertilizers for organic farming. And so, can you talk about some about your fertility and program for your herbs?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's really building the soil over the long term is the key here, which has the right tilth. It has the right, texture that it's absorbing and holding some water. Um, and then we also use the Neptune Harvest fish and seaweed spray. And we use a Harmony, which is like organic composted chicken manure as for fertilizers. Um, and then we make ferments out of our stinging nettles, which are these nice probiotic sprays. You can use as foliar sprays, or we water the roots of the fruit and nut trees with the fermented. So making ferments out of crops that you're growing is a really wonderful way to recycle nutrients. It potentiates the minerals and the nutrients, and it helps you to be able to utilize them for other crops.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Fertility is very important when you want to grow crops, and especially when you expect crops to give you something. And so, they're like, I want food. And so, just making sure that we have good soil health is key to growing good, healthy crops. But we are at 3 o'clock. And so I just want to make sure that I had time to thank Lindsay again for taking the time out to share your story and your farm. Um, if there is anything that you want someone to know about Stellar Roots Farm and Lindsay Mann, what is the best thing you want them to know about you?
Well, I don't know about me, but I was thinking I forgot to tell everybody that one of the best things that you can do when you start a farm is to try to go into the least amount of debt possible.
Mm, that's good to
Um,
speak
a
about.
lot of people go into debt buying big equipment. I haven't bought really any equipment because there's an equipment share in this area, in this region that we use. We rent equipment and we equipment share. So that's been really key, which I know is kind of a random thought to end on, but that's a really important piece is just to be very judicious. If you can buy land, that's key because that's an investment, but try not to buy, equipment, things like that really aren't investments and you don't want to go into debt if at all possible. So, um, but D'Anthony, I also just want to say, that you yourself and Rodale Institute has been really critical for me as early support in this journey of starting a farm. And I've been so grateful for your help. So I just want to put a shout out to Rodale and the Transition to Organic Partnership Program and D'Anthony himself.
Well, thank you so
Grateful.
much, Lindsay. It has been so much fun working with you. And when you get your certificate saying that you are certified, we are throwing a party, okay?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So, well, I want to thank everyone for taking the time out to joining us on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. It is growing season, and so I wish you the best in your growing season. And I do want to leave out with on the screen is my contact information. And so if you are a current or a transitioning organic grower in the Southeast who wants to learn more about uh, organic practices and or to get USDA organic certified and rock, please contact me and I would love to see how I can best support you. But with other than that, I hope everyone has a great week. And thank you so much again, Lindsay. I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.